So I arrived in Hong Kong around April, and when we got off the plane in Hong Kong, the first thing I felt was the humidity. And since I was in Pennsylvania, the humidity was nothing new to me and it felt comfortable. But I know for people who grew up in the West, it would be a bit of a shock. And it was cool because in Hong Kong, everything's in both English and Chinese. So even though we didn't read any Chinese whatsoever, we were able to get through the airport without any problems. And then we just waited outside of security and picking up our luggage for our mission president to show up. I mean, he happened to be late, but it was due to traffic. And then he and the APs, the assistants to the president, they split us up into two groups and drove us to the mission office. And we spent the night in patron housing. And patron housing is above the mission office, and it's built for people who want to come do temple work but don't have a place to stay. And so as long as they do 2 ordinances in the temple a day, they can stay there for free. And so we spent the night there, and then the next day we had training on how to be a missionary. They took us up to the Peak, which is a mountain on Hong Kong Island, and that's where the general authorities set Asia apart for missionary work. And so that was cool to see the exact spot where they did that. And when they set apart Asia, they did a carving on the rock, so with the date, and so we know that's where they did it. And then we went finding our first day, and they took us to a place where a bunch of the Filipinas were gathered. And we were all excited to do our finding in Chinese, and everyone spoke English, which was slightly disappointing. But at the time we couldn't recognize the differences between Chinese and Filipinas, and so we'd approach them and speak to them in Chinese, and they were like, I don't understand that. And then we'd switch back over to English. And then on the trains, they have a very good transportation system in Hong Kong. And the trains are called the MTR. And you just get on the stop and ride it to the next place. And it was fun to watch the assistants to the president just contact whoever's standing next to them. And then they would help us. They'd talk to people and then get us into the conversation. And then they had us find on the train until we got back to the mission home, where we had dinner and then had a little bit more training. And we went to bed very tired, but super excited to meet our trainers the next day. And so we had breakfast and we met our trainers, and I was up in the northeastern part of Hong Kong, and my trainer helped me get my luggage onto the train, and I was so lost. I had no idea where I was. I had no idea where I was going. I was surrounded by a language I didn't understand, but it was super fun to try and talk to people and have them be like, "Whoa, you're a foreigner, you speak Chinese? What?" And just see the shock and the amazement. And it was cool because even though I had the worst Chinese, they were more willing to listen to me and be willing to try to understand what I was saying than my trainer, who'd been there, about a year. And it's interesting to realize as a new missionary, that's probably your most powerful time when your language is the worst, because people are more willing to listen to you. And it doesn't matter if you make mistakes in the language, they'll work with you. I mean, yeah, you'll always have people who aren't patient with you, always find people who ignore you, don't want to hear about the gospel. But the initial impression that, wow, you're here learning my language, and yes, your language stinks, but you're learning, will help you strike up a conversation. And so that was really cool to see. And so we got to my apartment, and we were on the 27th floor of the apartment building. I think there were about 40 floors in that building, and everyone lives in skyscrapers. And so if you see a skyscraper, that's not an office building, that's a house, or with a bunch of different apartments on different levels. And my first apartment was actually built on a mall. And so there's the mall on the bottom with like 3 or 4 floors of mall. And then on the top, they had 6 different buildings that were 40 stories high that had people living in them. And so a group of these buildings is called a chun in Cantonese. And so we lived in a chun, and then we could just go down into the mall to buy groceries. And my apartment, we were lucky enough to be able to see part of mainland from the window at night. So it was cool to look out and see mainland and be like, wow, one day we'll be there. We'll just talk to everyone that we see here in Hong Kong, and then we'll go from there. And then my trainer was just very, let's go for it. And so she just kind of dragged me around the first week because I still had no idea where I was going. And she would help me buy food in Hong Kong. And most of the time we ate the bread, which is kind of a mix between Chinese and Japanese bread. So you had bolo bao, which is pineapple bread, that has this nice pineapple-y kind of flavored looked decoration on top of the bread, and it was really good. Or there's a coconut filled bread. They love butter, and so they would have bread with thick wedges of butter just in the middle of the slice. That was pretty good too. And then they also had rice boxes that you could choose different, they call them songs, which is like meat or vegetable, and you would choose one or two that you would eat with your rice, and those are really, really good. And so just like the culture, kind of a bit of a culture shock with so many people because they just live so close together. But then Sunday, when I met my wards, because at the time I was serving in 3 different wards at the same time, and just to meet the different wards and feel the members' love for me as a new missionary and for any missionary, that was when I was like, okay, I can make it. I love the people. I love Hong Kong. Let's go for it.